Joe, sir, welcome to the Tells the Leadership podcast. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well, Joshua. Thank you. How are you?
I can't complain, and I mean it, and I say it every time when I get an opportunity to talk to amazing leaders, someone who's had such a long historic career, especially as yourself, and they're still inspiring and making change. It's always a great day.
Well, likewise. I think that, and we'll talk more about this, I'm sure, but I know we're aligned in that leadership is a process of learning, and we're
Yeah.
always learning something new. We're always growing. We're always expanding our knowledge and making a new room for additional resources, capabilities, and people that uplift us and move us higher to new levels. So, yeah, thanks so much. I appreciate it.
One of the questions I always love starting with, and I think you've already answered it, and I already started taking feverish notes, is as how you define leadership. Because I have entrepreneurs on here, I've had senior level leaders from the Army, the Coast Guard. I think that you are the highest retiree, at least from the Navy, that I've had the opportunity to speak with, and I would love to hear, how you define leadership.
Yeah, it's multifaceted, as you know, and how I define it is it is a blend, right? It's art and science,
Mm,
it's data and emotion, it's inherited and learned, and all of that and more. But distilling that down, really, for me, I believe it's very important to understand what we believe leadership is and what we see it to be and what it can become, and also an understanding of what it's not.
yeah.
And I'll start with that first. In my view, and in my experience, leadership is not a position, it's not a rank, it's not a title, it's not an office. It is, however, a process of and a commitment to learning, growing, and caring about other people. Someone once said to me, "Well, gosh, I don't have this particular rank, or I don't have this particular office, or I don't have this role or this title. Therefore, I'm not a leader. I just have to do
Mm,
what I'm told." I said, "Wait a minute, absolutely wrong thought process. Everyone and anyone can be a leader if you are committed to a process and a culture of learning and innovation where you're inherently curious, you want to learn more, and you want to help other people learn more. And number two, that you, in addition to having that commitment to learning, you have a set of core values and principles that you live by. And you demonstrate that every day. And through your personal example, at whatever rank you are, if you're a brand new leader, if it's your first job coming out of school, in the military, if it's your first assignment, everyone can be a leader through their personal example and their commitment to learning. So I have distilled that down, and I've said, okay, leadership for me is a process of learning, growing, and caring about other people.
mm,
Leadership is not a person. It's not a single attribute. It's a combination of all those things. But most importantly, it's someone who's transcended beyond what they are doing and what they can do into understanding that the reason why we're here is to serve and take care of other people. Once that clicks for a leader at any level, at any echelon, there's no going back. They've transcended and they realize, hey, the reason I'm here is not for me. Leadership isn't about the leader. It's about those whom they serve.
yeah. I think that is probably one of the best definitions that I've had on the show. And I think specifically to the point of, if you can learn that leadership is really about serving other people, and if you can learn that at a very young age or early in your career and carry that forward, that's what makes amazing leaders. All the people that I've always looked up to, that's the same core common denominators, that they care about their people, they're curious, they're committed, and they want others to shine, and they're willing to share that light because they don't care about title or authority.
That's right. That's exactly right. That's why I mentioned earlier about understanding what it is and then understanding what it's not. And
Mm,
once we free ourselves of that and we disregard that and we understand that everything we do is about other people,
yeah.
let's face it, leadership would be a very, very lonely place
Yeah.
if the only reason we were doing it was for ourselves. Everything we do from start to finish, every minute of every day is about other people. And I'll just add this one more point, and it has to do with when we say it's about other people. For me, what that means is it is about uplifting, elevating, empowering, and inspiring them,
Yeah.
and helping them to understand that whatever they perceive as their own potential, whatever they perceive as their own limitations, whatever the organization or the team or the unit perceives as its expectations, can be exceeded and will be exceeded. And when a team of smart people gets together and they realize that, there's no holding them back. Anything's possible. But it starts with the individual understanding that they're in an environment where they're going to be inspired and elevated. And so when I say it's about other people, it's about elevating, uplifting, and inspiring them to say, wait a minute, you don't have any limitations. You're going to exceed your potential. You're going to exceed your expectations. And here's how. Here's how I'm going to help you.
I love that. And it goes back to a quote that it reminds me of by John Quincy Adams. And it always centers me in terms of leadership. If your actions inspire others to dream more, learn more, do more, and become more, then you're a leader. And that just beautifully encompasses what you just stated. I would love to take an opportunity before we really dig into your story. If
Yeah.
you could just provide an overview to the listeners of who you are.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Joe Polanin, I served 30 years in the U.S. Navy from 1990 to 2020. My profession was explosive ordnance disposal. And probably 20 of those 30 years, I was in positions of command or command authority. For
Well,
those who've not been in the military in the audience today, that's analogous to being the CEO or COO or equivalent of that organization. Very often, these were globally integrated enterprises and teams that were facing very high threat and high risk circumstances or environments and had very complex missions. And how does one galvanize, integrate, and synchronize those efforts
mm,
across continents, across time zones, to get the mission done? And sometimes it's hard, and sometimes it seems impossible. But what we learned early in my career, which we implemented for decades as the great teams that I had the privilege to be on, was that you either find a way or make one to get the job done.
mm.
The option is not to say, well, we're not going to get this mission done today. We're not going to make it happen. Together, we're going to find a way, or we're going to make one. And if there's an obstacle in the way, we're going to find a way through it, over it, around it, make it go away. Now, fast forward to 2020, when I transitioned out of the service. I explained to folks, I still continue to serve, even though I'm not in uniform. I'm just serving in new directions. Together with my daughters, we founded a private consulting practice. It's called the Alaka'i Leadership Group. Alaka'i is a word in Hawaiian, means great leadership. It's a lot more like a culture or an attitude or a lifestyle than it is a skill or capability. And essentially what we did with Alaka'i was we took the best practices and lessons learned of what I saw and what I experienced in the military. Best practices, what works well, lessons learned, what didn't work well. And we fashioned that into a proprietary consultative methodology. And today, through Alaka'i, we offer 3 services. The first one is senior executive leadership consulting. So the C-suite, and giving them advice, giving them tools that they can use to improve the efficiency and the effectiveness of their organizations. Fractional C-level leadership, whether it's fractional COO or fractional CSO, and in some cases fractional CEO, and then some inspirational speaking. We enjoy speaking. We enjoy writing about leadership and strategy and talent, and those are the focus areas of what we're doing today. So that's the last 34 years in about 3 minutes.
It's always inspiring when people can do that. Concisely wrap up 34 years of service. A couple things that stuck out to me. So I've been in now, I think, for 16 years, and I've transitioned from, junior officer to a field grade officer now. 20 years of being in command positions just strikes a chord with me, is that the level of effort and involvement and engagement that takes to be what we call in the Army is like switched on. it would be, it's inspiring. It truly is. Like that's most of people's career that stay full time in the military is 20 years, but you did 20 years within command roles, and that's no light task. And I also love how you talk about we always find a way, and it reminds me of the uniform that we wear and the American flag. And I get this question all the time, but why is the stars pointed to the front? It's because we're always moving forward. We never retreat. We always find a way. I absolutely love that. And you starting your leadership journey, I think in 1990, you were a U.S. Navy Academy Annapolis graduate. Is that
I
where
am,
you
yes.
is that where you saw your leadership journey start?
Oh, absolutely. In some cases before then, but from a very young age, I knew, I didn't know, I didn't have it all mapped out. I don't think anyone does.
Yeah,
But from a very young age, I knew that I wanted to go to the Naval Academy. I did not know necessarily what I wanted to do after that. And so I'd say probably from around the age of 13, 14, I knew that's what I wanted to do. And I became motivated and inspired to do that. And am blessed to be the first graduate from my high school to be able to do that. So
wow,
prior to my appointment, we had some students go to West Point and the like, but I was very, very blessed to have that occur and be and earn that appointment. And long story short, it wasn't until about my third year at the academy that I was introduced to the Navy's diving and EOD program.
mm,
And after that, that's what I knew I wanted to do, and went forward from there. And I think, like most of us, I did not necessarily have an intent that I was going to serve 30 years.
yeah,
I took another assignment. I liked it. My wife liked it.
yeah,
We had children. They liked it. I took another assignment. And next thing you know, we blinked and 14 years went by.
yeah,
And said, "Wow, and even it's interesting." And you probably shared these experiences, but even as I got older, and I'd been in for, let's say, 26, 27 years at this point, I'd be on a plane flying somewhere, and someone would stop me and say, "Oh, you're in the Navy. How long have you been in?" I said, "Oh, 27 years." "Oh, are you going to make it a career?" Yes.
yes,
Uh,
I'm
but
committed.
I think for me, it never felt like a job. It never felt like a profession. It just very simply felt like where I was meant to be, with whom I was supposed to be serving and doing what I was called to do. It seemed natural and where I was supposed to be. So, but yes, I believe for me, it certainly started there because I had some fantastic mentors and teachers, and yeah, it's a great experience.
Being committed, I think at the age 13 and 14, knowing that you want to go to an academy school like West Point, Annapolis, all of these schools, it takes a lot to get into those types of programs. And to be committed at such a young age, I could already tell you you're a way better man than me. When I was 13 and 14, I had no plan of what I wanted to do. I was just kind of floundering. I also love how you talk about that with being in the military for such a long period of time. At least for me, I never really look at it as a job because I genuinely love every single day of it. And looking back at it now, it's crazy to me that I've been in for 16 years. But it's funny, it was every 2 to 3 years we move. I
Mhm.
meet new amazing people. I have a new exciting job. I have the opportunity to learn new things that I didn't understand before, and it just keeps building and building and building. And I guarantee you, I'll blink and I'm at 20 years and I'm like, wow, that has went by too fast.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, and it is sometimes when we are in the middle of that, we don't pause and reflect and look
Yeah,
back and say, "Wow, look what happened." As I became more senior, um, the actually for me, it was almost like a tale of two professional careers. One prior to 9/11, and the
yeah,
other after,
mm,
because the op tempo, the mission, the requirements of what we were doing was vastly different. and it was, the focus was different, and therefore the needs were different. And I actually deployed a lot more as I got more senior,
Yeah.
because of where I was and what I was doing, than I did when I was a junior officer. And um, what we ended up doing, which was right, it was the right decision for our family. As my daughters got into high school, we said, okay, every time a new set of orders would come up, we would sit down and as a family and
Yeah.
have our mission analysis and figure out what we were going to do, and say, okay, what's the right decision for us at the time. Well, once the
Mm.
girls got into high school, we didn't want to move them around, so I went and I deployed and I did what I needed to do,
Wow.
and then I would get home as often as I could. I did that for the last about 8 years of my military service. So, but it was the right decision for us. It's not,
Yeah.
every family has to make that decision for themselves, and that's what was right for us. And we think we made the right call. And fast forward to today, it's a joy now to be able to work with my daughters and teach them what we've learned.
I love how you went back and you've created this consulting coaching company with your family and growing with your family. And I think it kind of just goes back to the level of servant leadership. And if you're willing to take on that burden of being in the military and raising the ranks of like strategic level positions, you have less and less and less and less time away from your family because you have more time committed to what you have to do for your job. People, I don't think fully understand that. They see all of these like titles, they see the rank of what people hold, but they don't understand all the different levels of sacrifice that they had to go through. And, I know a lot of friends that have done what you're doing or have done of where they will take a job for 2 to 3 years and leave their family where they currently are, so it doesn't have a major impact. And that is the right move for their family, but from a civilian standpoint, I guarantee you if someone was listening to that, they're like, "How did he do that?" But when I think military families are more resilient, if that makes sense. My daughter is one of the most amazing people in this world. She is the most resilient girl that I know. And if I compared her to some of our friends that are, I think, just civilians that don't understand that culture within the military of moving all the time and having to make new friends and start new
Mhm.
schools, it sounds almost countercultural. Like, hey, this isn't sustainable. I think it is, and you have a deeper level of relationship because you value the time spent with your family even that much more.
Yes, you touched upon a few points there that I'd like to just underscore for a moment. First of all, uh, the only reason that we as a family were able to accomplish any of that is because of my wife of 30 years, Deanne.
Yeah.
Um, she and I made a commitment early on about how we were going to raise our family and what we were going to do. And at every turn, um, no matter what the circumstance was, no matter where I had to deploy, no matter how long I had to be gone for, together we found a
Yeah.
way to work it out. And as you do with your family, and so many of our other teammates on the line or listening in today, um, it's hard. That because you make that decision and because you move in that direction, that doesn't mean that it's not hard. That doesn't mean that you're not sad. That doesn't mean that the separation doesn't cause additional stress and anxiety for everyone. But
Yeah.
I'm a firm believer that when one member in the family serves, the entire family sacrifices and serves, each in their own way.
Yep.
And in fact, both of our daughters, when they were considering what undergraduate universities to go to, they're going through the application processes to these various schools, and all of them said, "Hey, write an essay." And they both chose to write essays about their experiences and what they learned as a military child.
Mm.
And part of what their thesis was okay, we had our job, we had to do well in school and do our best in sports and our extracurricular activities and help mom take care of everything. Mom did her job to take care of us and to make sure everything was running like a fine-tuned machine at home, and all the wonderful things that our spouses do. And dad, his job was to take care of his team and take care of his people and lead them through whatever challenges they had to get through and bring everybody home safely. And I reflect on that often, because without one element, every element had to function in harmony and unity. And if one element didn't, then there was a problem. And when I think of our military service members and our veterans today, I always think in this term. I think the service member, the spouse, and the families.
Yep.
They are all together. They're our heroes. That's the reason why we do what we do.
Yeah, I have no doubt that I wouldn't be where I am if it wasn't for my wife. And my kids would not be who they are today if it wasn't for my wife. I love to take it back, pre 9/11. You just graduated the academy. You're getting ready to go into, I think, a training environment, but that's also when Desert Storm was getting ready to kick off. What were some of the? Because I'm genuinely curious. Some of the struggles that you had to face as a leader, going from a training environment to a combat environment within that Desert Storm period.
Yes, it was a very, very fast transition. Training was prominent, and it was a focus, but it was accelerated, shall we say.
Yeah.
My first assignment was on Minesweepers, and we had about 3.5 months to go through a 9 to 12 month certification and inspection cycle.
Wow.
And it was hard. It was really, really hard. But what brought us together were the teammates and the people on the ship, but this resilient, very precise focus that we knew exactly what our mission was, and we knew exactly what we needed to do. And at that time, what was happening was essentially crew exchanges. So we were training in San Diego area on a vessel that was the exact same type of vessel that there was another one over in the Northern Arabian Gulf. And then once we certified, we jumped on a plane and flew over there. We went through a series of turnover, and then we relieved that unit in place, and the individuals on that crew on that ship flew home. We got there, and we were supposed to be there for just a few months. And week by week, that got extended into about 8.5 months. And so the transition for all of us was a hard one, but I think it was made easier by the fact that we had a wonderful team of people, and we had a very, very focused mission, and we all knew what that mission was: mine countermeasures and removing mines and clearing the waterways for all the entry to all the ports in the Northern Gulf. So that was my first experience, and that is also where it validated for me that I knew that I wanted to go into EOD, because back in those days in the Navy, all EOD officers had to go through a qualification period on a ship first. Then you went to dive school. Then you went to EOD school. Now you get your commission, you go straight to dive school, straight to EOD school, and to your unit. But in those days, that's what our career path was. And so for me, those experiences and meeting so many of those brave warriors at that time validated for me, okay, now I know, I already knew that's what I wanted to do, but this gave it that extra level of support and validation.
I was curious what drove you to diving, and specifically the Navy Explosive Ordnance Disposal, EOD, because I remember some of the missions that we did in Afghanistan, I would have EOD embedded with me, and it was Army EOD. So the Army guys are just absolutely crazy. Some of the things that they would do on our patrols, put themselves in extremely harm's way with these improvised explosive devices, and basically blow them up for us in a controlled manner. What drove you to that career field?
Well, my scuba instructor would say it was James Bond, and I'll explain why. When I was a midshipman at the Naval Academy, my scuba instructor's name was James Bond.
Oh, wow.
And he said, wherever you go, whatever you do, you can always tell people that James Bond taught you how to scuba dive. And all kidding aside, I always loved the water, and I was never the fastest. I was never the strongest, but I always loved the water. And I think that was something that I know somehow, some way I inherited that from my dad, who passed away when I was very young, but he was an avid swimmer, loved the water as well. Unfortunately, I never got a chance to swim with him. But fast forward, that I think that love of the water started it. And then the first time that I went on an open water dive, I said, this is for me. This is where I want to be. I didn't know too much about EOD at the time. I was aware more of the Navy's diving program. But at the age of 20, when I was told, hey, you go into diving, you're also going to do EOD. I said, really, what's that? He said, well, you're going to get to blow things up and jump out of airplanes. I said, okay, that sounds great. Where do I go for that? Well, you have to go to school. You have to do this. And it just kind of went from there. Now, all kidding aside, the culture and the ethos is one that I know that you will identify this. Our EOD ethos is bounded by the notion of quiet professionalism, right? You do what's right because it's the right thing to do. You're not concerned about who gets the credit, and you get right back to work on the next task when it's done. And oh, by the way, when there's a struggle or when there's a hard time, you reach out and you grab your teammate and you make sure they're doing okay, and they come along with you. For me, that's what it's all about. Being selfless, putting other people first, being humble, and being focused on the mission. The phrase teammates mission comes to mind. There's no I in there. I guess there's an I in mission. That doesn't count. There's no notion of self. We were talking about this earlier, putting others first. But that ethos and that creed of quiet professionalism permeates the EOD community. And in fact, I'll tell you a quick story, Joshua. When I was the commanding officer of the Navy EOD school, which it's run and managed by the Navy, but all 4 services train there, and you have to go through and graduate from there in order to be a basic EOD technician. There was a young college student that was in one of the ROTC programs, and he came for a tour with his teammates. And we talked about a lot of different things. And when we were done, he said, "Sir, I have a question." I said, "Sure, what's that?" He said, "You talked about a lot of different things in order to be successful in EOD." He said you talked about academic excellence, physical fitness, teamwork, all these kinds of attributes. He said, what's the most important thing that we need to succeed? I said, well, that's easy. Don't quit ever. And when you resolve not to quit, but you reach out and you grab your teammate and you make sure they don't quit either. Because it's not about you, it's about your team. And now I don't know whether or not he ended up applying for the program. I don't know whether or not he ended up coming in, but for me, that's why. And it's just been an amazing opportunity to serve with and learn from such phenomenal people.
Exactly why I went in the infantry, and I chose to do hard things, jump out of planes and go to ranger school and do all of these hard things, is that I wanted to be around a great, inspiring group of people that had a strong culture and historic legacy, that didn't care who had the spotlight because no one was seeking credit, but always pushed you to be the best version of yourself. I absolutely love that. And then fast forward to over 1,000 plus combat missions and counterinsurgency operations and all the Middle East and then Africa. How did you grow from being more of a junior leader to a strategic level leader? What were some of the lessons that you had to apply or learn?
Well, first of all, Joshua, as I'm sure you know, there are many lessons. Yeah. There's one that stands out to me. A mentor of mine, where I worked on one of the Navy's numbered fleet staffs. This is analogous to being at a corps level headquarters. And I was a senior 04 at the time, getting ready to promote to 05. And I had a wonderful, wonderful department head and captain. And he called me in one day. He said, you know what? He said, I see you running around. You always have your notebook. You're always writing things down. You're always bringing together people. You're getting things done. You're making things happen. Somebody says to you, hey, can you do this? You say yes. And then the next day you get it done. He said, let me ask you something. He said, when are you going to stop doing things? And when are you going to start leading people to accomplish big things?
Mm.
And I at the time, it just hit me like a wall. And I talked with him in his office for about half an hour. And I left his office that day a different leader. And it wasn't something that I can put my finger on and say, well, immediately I started doing all these things differently, but it was a strategic shift where I realized that there are skills and capabilities and there's a level of excellence that you achieve. And at some point, you have to let go of some of those things, even if they're wonderful, wonderful, tried and true, effective ways to get the job done. At some point, you have to let go of that in order to make room for the new skills and the new abilities that you need to perform at the next level. And then again at the next level. And it's not about promotions and command. It's about leadership, and it's about what we talked about earlier. If you would have asked me then what my definition of leadership was, I guarantee you it wouldn't have been the same as the one I just gave you now, but for the experiences that I've had. But that was a strategic shift and a strategic point for me. And there was another one that came, this is a shorter story. There was another one that came when I was in task force command. So this is analogous to being in brigade command. And I was working in Europe, Africa, and for NATO. And my boss came to me and he said, hey, Polanin, I want to tell you what my command philosophy is. And I said, okay, yes, sir. And he said, okay, so if I don't tell you no, what do you think that means? I said, I think that means yes. He said, you're absolutely right. You're good. Keep moving. And he and I had wonderful conversations about command philosophy, mission command, delegation, empowerment. I learned so much from him in such a short period of time. But that was another one of those moments where I felt like I understood commander's intent. I felt like I knew the direction that we were moving in together, but just that short statement and that the empowerment that and the trust and the inspiration that went along with that were absolutely indescribable beyond the story I'm telling you today. It just made me feel 6 inches tall.
I think that those mentors were, perfectly placed in your career to help you move to that next level. And that's the beauty about the military, and I know the Navy's the same way as the Army, about developing junior leaders and seeking out and having mentors along the way. That we have that ability to get there. I don't see that as much now that I work in acquisitions for the Army. That as much within like the civilian ranks. It's very like check the block type when it comes to mentors. Like, all right, here's your quarterly assessments that most of the time that the peers do them or they do themselves. But having that strategic shift that you said of being able to identify if I want to continue to move up and gain influence and inspire people and make a bigger impact, I have to learn to delegate, or mission command of how we do it in the Army. I'm sure it's probably similar in the Navy. We have to be able to make a pivot that we can be greater as a team, and even more so than just as an individual. And that's the true difficult. And I would love to hear, maybe from your standpoint, you've led large organizations. sometimes you can't choose who's on your team. And I've taken over teams too that had adversity, inherent low morale, poor performance, all of those things. How did you turn around that culture?
Yeah, there are, and you're right. It's absolutely right. It's not like we were able to choose who was on the team, and especially when
Yeah.
you're at a higher echelon and you have units with commanders and commanding officers that have their own requisite authority, and you're trying to galvanize that group together. I have found three things to be, there are many more, but I have found three primary ways that have worked for me. Number one, having a bold vision. Status quo doesn't work. It's okay to keep things the way they are now. Doesn't work. This is the way we've always done it. Doesn't work.
Mm.
However, when a bold vision is presented, here's where we want to be in 2 years. Here's here's how we're going to change some things to make it better. I would always begin with listening. I have a methodology that I've used, that I would sit down with, that task force command that I told you about, and our staff was about 26 people. I sat down with each person on that staff for an hour and just listened to what they had to say. And I would always end with, if you could change something, what would you change? What would make this place better? What would be the right vision for us? What should we do? Why should we do it? And what I found was there was so much more commonality and so much more that united the team than there was that divided it.
Mm.
And then I was able to take those commonalities and say, okay, I sat down with everyone. Here's what I heard. Here's what you said. And 3/4 of everyone thinks we ought to do this. So you know what? We're going to do that. And in 6 months, we're going to do this. And in a year, we're going to do that. And that was always helpful. Number two, prioritization. So one of the things that I saw in a lot of the units that I worked with that didn't work well were too many priorities, too many tasks without purpose, too much work without understanding. And what I mean by that is, for example, this is not a joke, right? You can only have one most important thing.
Yep.
But I used to listen to leaders at a lot of levels talk about, well, this is the most important thing, and this is the most important thing, and these are my top priorities. You can only have one most important thing. And so prioritization is key, and letting people know that you have their back, and that you're willing to listen, and that not only that you're willing to listen, but that you understand, and that you're flexible enough to make changes. Nobody knows it all, so don't try. So number one, vision. Number two, priorities. And then number three, within those priorities, understanding that everyone has strengths. So you mentioned earlier about maybe the unit has low morale, or maybe there are some problems, or we don't get to choose the people that we have. I have found that if you listen carefully and you understand people and you put others first, you find out where people's skills are, and you find out where their strengths are. And it may not be in what is in their occupational specialty, or what's in their profession, or what is in their academic background. It may be in something else. I had one unit that I was working at. We had a reserve petty officer who worked in logistics and supply, and he was literally stocking shelves. And I found out that he had two, not one, two different PhDs in computer science.
Wow.
He didn't work in the stock room for very long, because we moved him into the information technology infrastructure, and he helped us out tremendously, transform that organization at that time and place. But we don't know what we don't know, and sometimes people come into an organization and they may or may not be in a position where they're being utilized in a way that inspires them and propels the organization forward. So having a bold vision, listening to people and prioritizing, and then recognizing that everyone has strengths, and why not put them in a position where it's going to be conducive to their success as an individual and to the unit's success.
One thing that I love in all of that, sir, and I don't hear that enough in other leaders, is listening and giving other people the time and space to hear. Most of every organization, at least what I've seen, the answers are there within the organization, within the team. You don't have to reinvent the wheel, but you have to be able to create that in a space of where you can get that type of illicit feedback and then act upon it. So I created an acronym, just listening to you: listen, observe, and then act. LOA. Just go out there and do that. I
I
love
like it.
that
I
advice.
like it. No, thank you
So
so much. And it's, you say about listening. So listening is a skill, Joshua, that I'm always working to get better at. And in
yeah.
fact, all of the teammates that I've served with over the years, they would say, Polanin loves to talk. I do love to talk. I'm the individual who, if there's a 2-minute conversation happening, I'm the guy who can add 30 minutes to that 2-minute conversation. But I before I had the privilege of beginning my first command tour, I went into that tour thinking, boy, communication is the most important thing.
Yeah.
Communication is the great teams, great organizations. They begin and they end with great communication. Boy, communication is the most important thing. And at the end of that tour, I still believed that communication was the most important thing, but I was resolute in my focus that the listening component of communication is vastly more important and more impactful. I read a quote the other day, and I'm not sure who said this, nor is my colleague who I fact checked it with, but it goes something like this: when we speak, we're repeating something we already know.
Yeah.
But when we listen, we have the chance to learn something new.
I always go back to this concept of leading with windows, of where leaders are transparent, and I love that idea of that. There's a screen as well within in there. So if I give you feedback, it's a two-way street. Communication and listening is a two-way street. I should not always be creating the ideas. I should be listening intently and then filtering out those ideas based on if they will work or fit the current operational environment. Because that is what the leader does. They steer the course and they drive bold change and create those inspirational visions, but they also make sure that they're staying on course and they're moving towards their true north. And you spent such over 30 years in the Navy. I would love to hear that story of what inspired you to get out and then also create your own leadership consulting group.
Yeah. So I always knew that I wanted to start a business, a company of some kind. I just didn't know what shape or form that would take. And
Yeah.
so even a few years before I retired from the military, I thought, okay, I want to do this. And then when I had the conversation with my daughters, who now are both in graduate school, um, one's working on becoming an attorney. The other one, I think, is going to become an entrepreneur, is working on her MBA right now.
Well,
But when I had the conversation with them and with my wife, and we talked about it, I said, I definitely want it to be something that I love. And what inspired me was, remember I mentioned to you earlier that the military, the Navy, never felt like work to me. It just felt like where I
yeah.
was meant to be. I wanted to have that same feeling. And I
Mm,
thought really hard about it. So from when I first decided, and when we first decided to start the company, I didn't do anything with it for like a year. I just thought really hard about, what do I want to do? Why do I want to do it?
yeah.
And what can I do that I love that nobody else is doing? So I studied about 100 similar consulting firms. And I realized that there are a lot of companies out there that say they can do what I do. There are a lot of companies out there that say that they could offer as a service offering what we do. But there weren't any that I could find after I researched 100 that said they only do what our thesis was and what our model was. And so that's what I learned when I was in the Navy. And what I did was I fashioned with my daughters, we fashioned this proprietary model around the concept of vision, planning, and people. So what's the vision for your company? Wonderful, great. What's the plan of action to make it happen? And it can't be a 150-page thing that sits on the desk and gathers dust. It's got to be something simple that people can get behind. And then people. To what degree are your people inspired and motivated, and are they champions for this cause? If you have a bold vision and you have a clear and simple plan of action, and your people are inspired and motivated, just like the CEO or the president or the founder, that is rare, and that company is going to be able to accelerate and grow. And so many organizations that I had the privilege of serving in the military, I got to implement that kind of a model. Yep. And I didn't keep a logbook or anything, but that's what I love to do. And so I kept the best practices and I kept the lessons learned. And that's why we did it. Because again, for me, that's not work, Joshua. That's just helping people. And if I can help one company accelerate beyond what they think their limitations are, or if I can help them not make a mistake that will cause them or cost them in the future problem, then for me, that's all worth it. And that's why we do what we do. And that's why we founded it. Because again, for me, that's not work. It's just where I'm supposed to be.
I love the concept that you're doing this because you want to continue to serve and inspire other people. And the whole reason that I started this podcast and everything that I'm doing in terms of leadership is because I believe it's my time, talents, and treasures that I can get back. But I also believe if I can impact one leader and teach them how to lead with a servant heart, be transformational, be what I like to call a purposeful, accountable leader, a PAL, they can impact 1,000 lives. 1 million lives, maybe. And maybe one of those lives could be a veteran or an active duty service member that's on the brink of suicide. And at the deep core root of what I'm doing is to try to build better leaders so I could save a life. That's all of this. And I know that's near and dear to your heart too, because I did my due diligence. You're the president of the board of the Veterans Ranch, a nonprofit that helps ending veteran suicide. I would love to hear how did you get involved in that?
Yeah, it's an absolutely phenomenal organization, and the notion is that through equine therapy and interaction with horses, beautiful, wonderful animals, that those who are undergoing periods of post-traumatic stress, those who may be undergoing other emotional challenges of any kind, the benefit that can be derived from that is, again, indescribable. And it's an organization that is 100% dedicated to eliminating veteran suicides. I don't know the exact number, but I know the number is probably greater than the estimates that are prevalent today. And quite frankly, one is too many.
Yep.
And I have known far too many teammates that have returned, as I'm sure you have too, that have returned from whatever operational environment that they were in, that have invisible scars and invisible wounds that they may not heal from. And like you mentioned earlier, if we can help one of them, then it's worth it. And someone said to me, and I had this conversation with J.R. Smith and his father, who are the founder of the Veterans Ranch, and we said, someone will say, well, we're trying to help thousands of people. That's insurmountable. It's impossible. How's that happen? And the conversation that we had was, maybe there are a lot of people. There certainly are a lot of people that we're trying to help. But if you look at it that way, then it may seem extremely challenging. But what if you help one person? Yep. And you can't prove a negative. So what if you help one person and that person chooses to live and they choose life?
Yeah.
To them and their family, the aid and the assistance that helped in that choice means everything.
Yep.
And we may never know the number of people that we help, but again, if we can help one, as you mentioned earlier, that's what it's all about. Yeah, they're a great group of people and a fantastic organization.
Yeah, I saw that, and I definitely wanted to bring that up from just the standpoint of just saying thank you. Using your platform and being able to help veterans, that's something that's near and dear to my heart. And I wish I had more time to volunteer for things like that, but one day I will. I'm the season of life that I'm in right now. But thank you for that. And then one of
Absolutely,
the
thank you.
last questions I wanted to bring up was the book that you kind of co-authored too. So Unleashing Firepower, Mastering of Business Excellence. And this really interesting concept of this book is a bunch of different authors who provide their wisdom. And I would love to hear, how did that book kind of come about?
Yeah. So about 4 months ago, I had the great privilege of meeting the individual who led the development and the key author and the key editor of that book, Coach Michael J. Tolan, and he has a wonderful podcast, is just like yours, a wonderful podcast, and it's called, instead of impossible, it's I'm Possible. Right?
I
Same
love that.
letters, but it means something different. Of course, anything's possible, right? And he is a wonderful, wonderful leader and a fantastic human being and a great friend. And we did a podcast like this, and it was fantastic. And he approached me afterwards and he said, you know, what I'm thinking about doing is bringing together many of the people who I've had as guests on the show and asking each one to write a chapter in the book. And would you consider contributing? And I said, absolutely. And it kind of took off from there. And we then did a conference, a virtual conference, just like this, where different guest speakers came in. And it wasn't really a book launch, but what we did was everybody who was a co-author spoke for a few minutes, and then other keynote speakers came in to talk about leadership and talk about successful management and organizational development, whatever their different. We had sales leaders, we had attorneys, we had doctors, we had other different manufacturing professionals, etc. And during that, we spoke about the book and let people know about it. And 48 hours later, it was a #1 bestseller on Amazon.
That's
and
amazing.
So, yeah, just everything happens for a reason. And it was a fantastic experience. And Coach Michael J. Tolan, Unleashing Firepower, he's just a fantastic person, and I'm very, very glad to know him.
I love that concept of just eliciting all the different wisdom from multiple different leaders and putting it in one book. I bought that book actually yesterday, so it's coming in on Amazon. I'm excited to read that. Last question
Thank
before
you.
we get to the
Thank you.
final show segment, and it'll be kind of rapid fire questions, but this is one of
Sure.
the last ones that I love. Is what is the best advice that you would give to someone who's just getting ready to start their leadership journey?
Don't think that it's about you. Always put other people first. Be patient. Be patient with yourself and others, because you're going to make mistakes. And always have larger and grander expectations than you think. The phrase "bite off more than you can chew" comes to mind.
Mm,
I go back to, and I'm paraphrasing here, the phrase that Vince Lombardi made famous, where we aim for perfection, but we find excellence along the way. We go into it knowing that there is no such thing as perfection in life. We are, by our human nature, imperfect, and we will never be perfect. So it's not
mm,
about if you're going to make a mistake. It's about when you make a mistake and how you rebound from that and how you are resilient from that. But have bold goals, have big dreams, and go for it. And I'll wrap that part up by another one of my favorite all-time characters, and that's Rocky Balboa. I boxed when I was in college. I wasn't very good, but I enjoyed it, and I enjoyed the workout.
yeah.
I lost many more fights than I won. My teammates will tell you that, but I enjoyed it. And maybe I had a hard head. Maybe that's why I enjoyed it. But Rocky Balboa was famous for saying it's not about how hard you can hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. How much you can take and keep moving forward. Those who are resilient, no matter what the challenges that come their way, are going to be those that help others succeed, and themselves will succeed in the future.
I usually do like a final show segment with 4 rapid fire questions, but that was such a beautiful ending point. It really is of this episode. The last one I'll just throw out at you, sir, is how can our listeners find you, and how can they add value to your mission?
Absolutely. So it's www.thealakaigroup.com, TheAlakai group.com. That's our website. That's the best way to find us. How you can add value is if you are in need of, or if you know others who are in need of either senior executive leadership consulting for the senior leaders in your organization, fractional C-level or senior leadership support, or inspirational speaking. You need a program for a leadership conference. Any of those three areas. Generally speaking, I can work with any, and I love to work with any type of organization in any industry or sector. But I specialize, and we specialize in organizations that are, let's say, from 1 to 10 years in organizational development. And maybe just getting going, an early stage company, or a company that's been successful but wants to grow and scale and doesn't really know how, or a company that's going through perhaps an M&A event, or they're thinking about selling the organization. Those types of companies, generally speaking, need additional senior executive leadership support that we're uniquely positioned to provide. So if your organization fits into that category, or you know someone who does, you can certainly add value to us by letting us know and having them contact us through our website.
Joe, this has been, I'm going to say, sir, I can't help it. This has been a phenomenal episode. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and being intentional with me for this past hour. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Joshua, thank you so much for what you're doing, and thank you for your wonderful efforts and for your service as well, teammate.
Yeah. Have a good day, sir.
Thank you.